I would love to see a Jerry Seinfeld bee trying to carry a lady across Bronson Canyon.
I'm sure it exists in DeviantArt somewhere.
DeviantMart is a friend of mine. Don't you dare besmirch his name. Today, part of the plan was watching Season 1, Episode 7, Robot Monster.
The movie that thanks a bubble machine in its opening credits.
But first, some follow-up. We received a lovely letter from one Chad in Seattle. I grew up in a small town. Oh, I like the way this starts. Very sexy. With little access to performing arts and no independent theater, so I passively consumed mainstream entertainment without much thought about its artistic merit. While I was first drawn to the snarky Mystery Science Theater take on bad movies, I came to appreciate their deconstructions on why these films went awry and their ability to concisely put them in the context of their time, all while producing a show with its own artistic value. Without trying to, The Satellite of Love provided me with a more sophisticated palette for motion pictures. And see, that's a really interesting thought, that you end up getting an education in what does and does not work in a movie thanks to MST3K.
Especially in the Joel era, I feel, and particularly this episode, spoiler alert, really tries to contextualize what was going on, during the time it was made, its influences. I just remember one time I was watching Wild Rebels, and Joel pointed out, this anti-hero, almost loathsome lead was something that was very trendy in the 60s. So you had to put it in that context to really understand what was going on there. I thought that was really insightful.
And also, there's technical things that if you're exposed to MST3K at a young age, you'll pick up for the first time. I had never even heard the term boom mic until Joel pointed it out in Mitchell. And there's a great eye here where they're talking about serials and how the cliffhangers cheat. Of course, more on that later. But yeah, I think that that's something that you get as, if you're not a fan of movies already by the time you're watching Mystery Science Theater 3000, I think the show makes you into one. It makes you into someone who appreciates film, weirdly enough.
I would agree, and we were talking about this with producer Chris, and how watching bad things kind of make you appreciate good things. I mean, I never really thought about framing before the Ed Wood Sinister Urge, where they're constantly making fun of Ed Wood for his bad framing, and then I started paying attention to how you decide where a camera is going to be placed in a way that I hadn't really thought about it before.
Yeah, that's true, and I think that that's something you see. One of the things that's really great about this show is that you get such a wide variety of bad.
Yeah, lots to choose from.
Different styles, different eras, different failures each and every time.
Well, speaking of failures, Adam, maybe we should talk about the movie today.
I must, and I can. This time we watch Season 1, Episode 7, Robot Monster.
Oh, wait. First we have to talk about some shorts. Episode 4 and 5 from the serial Radar Men from the Moon. All right, it's Episode 4, Flight to Destruction. So basically, there's a bad guy in a skull cap and eyeliner who claims to be from the moon and who hires a bunch of Dick Tracy extras to get some money to buy a new truck for his new super ray gun. They burst into Cody Laboratories and kidnap a lady scientist named Joan to hold for ransom. And they take her away on a biplane, and oh no, the plane! It's crashing! What will happen? We find out in the next episode. Joan's fine, she had a parachute. Anyway, in the second short, Murder Car, the baddies plot an elaborate rescue of one of their henches, who was arrested after attempting to rob a bank. It involves stealing a giant ambulance come ice cream truck, switching cars, and the most deadly game of chicken ever put to film. Will Commando Cody survive a head-on collision? Tune in next time, or don't, to Radar Men from the Moon.
And now, our feature presentation. After the title Robot Monster, we open on a little boy wearing a plastic helmet blowing bubbles from a wand. Oh, this is Johnny, and he's just teasing his sister Carla. I was worried for a second there. Could you imagine a movie where the titular robot monster was just a little boy in a doofy helmet blowing bubbles? How embarrassing. All right, movie, you can show us the real robot monster now. Oh my god, it's a guy in an ape suit wearing a diving helmet. Well, at least the real robot monster has a machine to blow his bubbles for him. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Johnny and Carla run into a cave and find a pair of archaeologists, Roy and an unnamed German professor. Before the professor can ask Johnny if he likes gladiator movies, the foursome are joined by Johnny and Carla's mother and their older sister Alice. The family excuse themselves from the archaeologists to resume their rock quarry picnic before they all take a nap among the slag heaps. Johnny wakes up from his nap and heads back to the cave only to get struck by lightning. A flurry of stock footage from other movies flashes before our eyes. Johnny dusts himself off and finds the cave now occupied by a guy in an ape suit wearing a diving helmet. This is Roman. Roman Skypes his boss, the Great Guidance, who is another guy in an ape suit wearing a diving helmet. The two Roman from the planet Roman spell things out for Johnny and the viewers at home. Roman conquer planets and destroy all life, so the Great Gazoo has sent Roman to Earth to strangle the last living humans. Humans. This is what the ape bots call the plan. Johnny warns Earth's remaining humans about Roman. The survivors consist of the archaeologists and Johnny's family from the picnic prologue. Oh, and Roy and Alice are now an item. Hoping to negotiate peace, the professor Skypes Roman, but the ape bot stops paying attention when he sees Alice. The one Roman calls Alice makes his helmet fog up, so it's not long before the smitten ape bot kidnaps her and takes her back to his lair. Oh, and Roman strangles Carla and Roy to prove to his boss that he's still into killing humans. Back at the bubble cave, Roman calls the Great Guidance and, drunk on lust, tells his boss how he wants to be human.
Yes, to be like the human. To laugh, feel, want. Why are these things not in the plan?
This goes against the plan, so the Great Guidance shoots lightning bolts from his fingers, which simultaneously kills Roman and causes the stock footage from earlier in the movie to play again. Johnny wakes up at the cave to find Roy and Carla still alive. Wait, wasn't Johnny hit by lightning earlier? No matter. The archaeologists are safe, and Johnny's family laugh at his wild imagination. It was all a dream. Or was it? Roman walks out of the cave and straight into the camera. Then he does it twice more for effect. Then he does it twice more for effect. Then he does it twice more for effect. The end?
Now let's talk about the episode. The show opens with Joel on his lonesome and in a smoking jacket, casually explaining the premise of the show next to a tasteful flower arrangement. After the break, Joel is fixing a frightened gypsy's mouth with a glue gun. A laser torch. For the invention exchange, the Mads invent a whoopee cushion filled with methane gas, sure to impress all your frat buddies. Joel isn't impressed because he has a Cumber Bumblebund, an oddly familiar invention that is essentially a fanny pack with a bubble maker attached to it. Weirdly enough, this invention is a subtle nod to one of the main props of the movie. In segment 2, Joel and the bots try to figure out how Commando Cody would fly. As Tom Servo notes, with such a powerful and heavy jetpack on his back, in real life, Cody would be cartwheeling his butt all over Southern California. Joel mentions that according to physics, bumblebees shouldn't be able to fly. In attempting to work through this piece of illogic, every bot on the ship accidentally blows up their own brainses. Speaking of robot violence, in the next segment, Crow and Tom play act the movie, and Tom, as Roman, pretends to menace Joel. Joel doesn't realize this is a game, and hits him with a chair. He apologizes, then hits him again when Tom resumes the game. The movie really starts to take its toll in segment 4, and Joel attempts to alleviate the pain by suggesting that the movie's senselessness is intentional, a la Salvador Dali or Rene Magritte. Crow asks, "Is it cool to make no sense?" Joel responds, then things start to get groovy. In the final segment, the SOL crew, wearing garbage bags that I think is supposed to invoke classical Greek chorus, discuss the movie and its various paradoxes. To paraphrase, Roman destroyed all of humanity, except 6 refugees who lived but a short walk from his cave. Also, Roman kept cities intact so that they could enjoy them, but Roman lived in a cave. Also, Roman was an artificially created human being with no emotion or passion, but he loved bubbles. In Deep 13, the Mads wonder if their test subject has finally snapped.
Well, Beth, we did it. We're back in season 1.
Mm-hmm. What'd you think?
Well, this, like Puma Man from before, is a gift. This movie, Robot Monster, is the kind of movie that was designed for the show and was designed for midnight movie festivals and bad movie parties and everything. Like, it's as bad as a movie can get. It's so typical of 1950s poverty row science fiction gone wrong, right down to the stock footage from other bad science fiction movies.
Mm-hmm.
And Roman, we'll talk more about this movie later, but Roman is hilarious. Every time Roman is on screen, I laughed, and everything about Roman is funny to me. But I think overall, like, this episode was really good. I was not looking forward to Commando Cody shorts, and there was a lot of good riffs. I was especially fond, Joel knocked one out of the park, where he made a My Mother the Car reference when he said, Jerry Van Dyke's other car says, my other car is my mother.
That was great.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good jokes throughout. I was shocked. Like, I had abandoned season 1 when I tried watching the show in order when I was in university. Like, I got through all the KTMA and I got about halfway through season 1. I should have given it another couple of episodes because Robot Monster is really great.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm extremely surprised to be saying that. I was not looking forward to doing this movie. It has a lot of things that I don't look forward to in the series. Season 1, which I'm starting to turn around about, actually, was a little bit of a worry, and 50s walking movies are not my favorite.
There's a lot of walking in this movie. That's all Roman does.
But I really enjoyed pretty much everything about this episode. The segments were funny. Commando Cody was challenging, but I found it fascinating, the serial format, because it's just so foreign to everything we know about entertainment. And the movie was really good. I enjoyed it. I have to say, this is better than It Conquered the World. I do not understand why this movie is legendary for being bad. And this is one of the better, like, 50s monster movies that I have encountered. And I found this movie really fascinating for what it was doing. Like, so many people who were talking about it were saying that it was surreal or didn't hold together. But if you accept the premise that this is all a fever dream of a small child who just got hit in the head, it really does all fit together. You know, his desire for some male influences in his life, his focus on bad, evil robots. I mean, we're going to talk about it later, but I really think, like, the things that are good about this movie, as opposed to so bad that they're good, has to do with the writer, Wyatt Ordong, and we'll get to him in a minute. Mm-hmm. But it's also just, like, the fact that they're taking it to such a bleak place that you don't usually get in the 50s, because this is essentially the bad guys are the Red Scare. They want to make everybody the same. They want to, take everyone's individuality away, or they just want to kill them. But the fact is that they win. There's no hurrah America here. They win. They have destroyed humanity, and we're just basically following the hangers-on as they slowly get picked off. Like, that gets dark, man. And it's really fascinating to see how that plays out. The Roman dialogue, well,
it's all amazing.
It's all silly. Amazing. It's strangely affecting at moments. Like, it's just
really.
Yeah.
Were you tearing up where he said, "I must, but I cannot"?
I cannot, yet I must. How do you calculate that? At what point on the graph do must and cannot meet? Yet I must, what I cannot.
It was just like it was silly, but it was like, why is he suddenly talking like Hamlet? Like, it was just.
It's funny because, you know what, that to live like the human, to laugh, to love, that has been compared to the to be or not to be speech. It's been said as that's the to be or not to be of bad movies.
Yeah, I believe it. And so I was thoroughly entertained. I thought this was a great movie, and I'm glad we had an opportunity to do it.
I was a little skeptical. Like, I knew that I would be entertained because I've seen this movie on its own, and it's a wild ride. It's super funny. And it's very compelling. It's never boring, even though most of it is just characters walking. Like, almost all of it is just Canyon walking.
Oh, yeah. This is actually, I think we should just refer to this kind of genre as 50s Bronson Canyon movies, because that's basically what they all are. Yeah.
And yet, despite that, it's like I would have been happy watching this on its own once again. And so I figured it's like, well, if nothing else, I'll get to watch Robot Monster if it's a below par episode. But yeah, something gelled. Like, I always sort of associated the show hitting its stride at the beginning of season 2, but I'm wrong. I'm really looking forward to seeing some more season 1s just to see, like, what are the really good ones.
Exactly. It's going to be a fun exploration.
Oh, well, what's interesting is that Josh Weinstein was really against using this in the series. He did not want to do Robot Monster. In fact, he suggests that most of Best Brains was on his side. And the only reason they ended up doing it is because they couldn't get the rights to anything else that week and they had to make a show.
Wow, is it just because its reputation preceded it to some extent?
Yeah, it was too famous. It was too famous. And yet, weirdly enough, he believes, because there's a great intro for this episode on the Show Factory DVD, he said that he thinks that it ended up working in the show's favor because being able to use the silhouettes in the theater and clips of Robot Monster in the early promos for the show helped sell the show as an idea and give people a sense of, what is this? Oh, well, you have these characters and they're clearly watching terrible movies and talking over them. And that may have actually and there was enough kind of heat from Robot Monster, from its reputation, that people would be curious to give it a look based on the fact that, well, if they're going to show something like Robot Monster, what else are they going to show on this show?
Yeah, exactly. I will say, I one catch, because I don't want this to go uncommented upon. We've already talked extensively about the weird erotic charge that mid-century... No, but the fact that for the mid-century, apparently nothing was more interesting to Hollywood than monsters wanting to rape white women. We've talked about that. I forget what episode.
I do believe it's Revenge of the Creature.
Yes, Revenge of the Creature. This one takes it to a whole other level. When Roman actually rips off Alice's shirt. Nothing is shown. This is the closest to graphic sexual molestation I think we have come to in the series so far, and it kind of shocked me.
Well, wait, wouldn't you compare this to something like Ega?
Well, I mean, maybe in this atmosphere of Me Too, we're more kind of attuned to moments like that, but it was a bit shocking to me. So never mind all of the fact that she gets tied up by both friends and enemies. That's, an obvious kink, but and I'm not going to hear to kink shame, but this movie does have some weirdness in it. So just maybe as a warning, there is one kind of shocking moment in this movie.
I like how you mentioned that as opposed to the actual animal violence that we see in the movie.
Oh, that too. It's I want to mention it's from another movie, but you very much get a Gila monster thrown at a croc, and it doesn't fare well.
No, in fact, we saw this exact same footage in King Dinosaur.
Mm-hmm. We mentioned how that's not good. I have to say that was an impressively glued on fin, though.
It stayed on.
Yeah.
I think you said that last time as well.
Well, it's worth remarking on again. The props in that bit of stock footage are more durable than anything in the actual Mystery Science Theater 3000 host segments.
Well, Adam, we just kind of got launched in medias res of a series called Radar Men from the Moon. Were you able to make any sense of it?
Well, I mean, it's not that complicated. So there's these moon men, and they're up to no good, and they've employed a local ne'er-do-well to help them with bank heists and things. It's got something to do with the moon. And anyway, there's this all-American, possibly a GI, I forget, who flies around wearing his stupid Rocketeer mask and, thwarting ne'er-do-wells.
Did you like it?
Did I like Commando Cody? No. Of course not. It was terrible, but I mean, I could make sense of it, yes.
I wouldn't say it was good, but I really enjoyed watching it just because it's so foundational in a lot of ways.
Wait, for the listeners at home, we have to establish that Beth has seen only one other movie, and that's The Rocketeer.
Actually, I've never seen The Rocketeer. It's still on my list.
God damn it! You had one job.
But that might be what's influencing this, because I do remember the previews from when I was a young kid, and they just made it look so amazing, a movie. Apparently it wasn't very good, but that aesthetic that the Rocketeer borrowed heavily from is in this series, the kind of Art Deco machines and the weird combo of guys in zoot suits with a moon man. Like, it's just a combo that just seems so strange to me, but also really fascinating. The fact that it's also geared towards boys from like 9 to 14, so there's just a bunch of car crashes and guns.
Yeah.
For no reason.
Plus, a flying guy who, with his mask, I think Tom Servo has a great line where he refers to Commando Cody as Jack-O-Lantern Private Eye. It's a great visual.
Yeah, the visuals are amazing. Obviously, highly influential. It influenced two other, flots we're more familiar with, which is Sky Captain, The World of Tomorrow.
Are people familiar with that? That movie tanked hard.
So did Rocket.
It's also terrible.
Apparently, and I haven't seen it yet to verify. Rocket.
What?
No, not Sky Captain, but The Rocketeer is apparently quite good. Its big flaw was it came out at a bad time when like a whole bunch of really great movies were coming out.
I'm willing to see The Rocketeer. I also missed it, but it was a recent video by Red Letter Media where they did an overview of The Rocketeer, and Mike Stacklasa more or less describes it as a perfect movie. That got me interested. Yeah.
Oh.
So that's enough to make me think, okay, I'll give it a watch. I have listened to the James Horner score. It's pretty good. And I do love any movie where Timothy Dalton is the bad guy.
Yeah. No, there's a lot going for it. It makes me want to see Rocketeer, so maybe that's what we can get out of these serials.
If nothing else, it makes the movies they influence seem all the more appealing. Yeah, well, I will say, watching it, I was reminded, like, one of the big differences in watching a film serial versus watching a film proper, especially in the context of this show, is that so often you get a movie that is hypnotically boring where nothing happens and it's fascinating. Like that, to me, thinking about Chad's letter earlier, was one of the biggest things I got from Mystery Science Theater 3000, is that some people, whether it is in the storyboarding and filming stages or in the script stage, just simply forget to have things happen so there's not a sequence of events.
Yes, the legendary padding through walking.
Yes.
And you gotta say, for these series, they move fast.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, this is far pacier than most of the films that we watch for this show. So there's something kind of like brisk and exciting. I can see why film serials would have been an easy sell for like early TV syndication.
Mm-hmm.
Because it would have been so exciting. Like, this thing would have moved faster than like any half-hour or hour-long shows that would have been on at the time.
Yeah, so I would say if you have a historical bent, these might be worth checking out. They're only like 10 minutes each, just to get a feel for that strange pace they have. Because, yeah, if you're used to movies from the 40s and 50s being a bit plodding, this is a very different feel for that look.
Which is interesting because they're only on episodes 4 and 5, the fifth of which is titled Murder Car, which might be the best. I was really hoping that they were going to introduce a character with that name, but to no avail.
I think I know what my Halloween costume is going to be.
Murder Car. But Joel and the Bots are not pleased with having to watch these installments, and I found that to be kind of interesting. I'm curious if that's something they would have done in later years of the show, because I mean, we're only on episodes 4 and 5. They had done, I think, just one with previous episodes, and instead of a double bill, but they're already sick of these, and they really play up how they don't want to watch them.
Yes, I think that's partly because they haven't established that they're not supposed to be worn down by these movies yet, except in exceptional circumstances.
I'm curious as to how they handle this in later episodes, because I think from this point on, there's at least one more double bill of Commando Cody episodes, and I'm curious as to how that plays out in the show and like their ongoing reaction. That gives something, I think, for viewers week to week tuning in, something to play off of as well. Like, I guess that's mirroring the viewer's frustration too. Perhaps they learned something from the back-to-back Gamras of KTMA, which actually got viewers to call in and leave messages saying no more turtle movies.
Really?
Yeah.
I would agree. So Josh Weinstein, right out of the gate, basically says this movie stars no one, which is kind of mean.
Yeah, all the stars came out for this movie. The skies were dark. To steal another podcast joke. So, because
these were not really famous stars, but they were all pretty solid working actors, at least a couple of them. George Nader, Selena Royal, they had long and storied careers before this movie.
Well, it certainly varies. Like in some cases, I was surprised to find out that Gregory Moffat, who plays young Johnny, actually did acting after this movie because his performance in this film is diabolical. But he ended up acting in several bits of television, including, and this is his last credit according to the IMDb, an episode of The Adventures of Superman.
When you see a bad kid actor, you have a director that can't direct kids. That's the long and short of it.
Well, he also, like, here's the thing. As bad as he is, he only contributes to the many, many, many charms of Robot Monster because he is responsible for one of my favorite things in this movie, which is when his sister dies and they're all at her grave and he goes, "Oh, I should have played house with her more often," which he says about as dryly as I would if reading out a grocery list.
And then his stranger/dad is like, "Well, let's just move on. She's dead now."
Oh, it's so good. Now, Carla, on the other hand, her career more or less ended when Carla got strangled. She was extremely nervous, and apparently Selena Royal had to adjust her before filming because she would not realize where the camera was actually pointed and where she should be.
And that's one of the great jokes from Tom Servo when her credit comes up. He's like, "Oh, she's good in everything." No, this was her only starring role. And no, she's not an actor.
Again, contributing to a somewhat mesmerizing quality that this movie has, which is that her sheer discomfort at being on camera, like, you can feel it. You can feel her squirming every time she's on screen, and it's delightful. She does not want to be there.
It really makes you appreciate the kid in Manos, the Hands of Fate, who could at least wander on set to some extent and find her spot on the floor. Phil Tucker, the director, he had an interesting career.
Phil Tucker is super interesting. So he apparently got inspired to make this movie because he delivered telegrams and he got lost. And he ended up in the Chavez Ravine, where most of the filming took place. And he thought, and I quote, "Wow, shit, this is fantastic. It looks like a war-torn country. I'll make a picture for it." And that, and only that was the inspiration for Robot Monster. He turned to the writer, Wyatt Ordung, and this was his pitch, according to Ordung. "Tucker came to my house with his wife Francine and said, 'I have a picture I want you to write. It's called Google Eyes.'"
What?
And as he explained, this was going to be a comedy set after the world had ended and robot monsters were trying to exterminate the last of humanity. And it was only the arguing of the writer where it switched to maybe being I don't know, would you call it a science fiction drama?
I would, but now I really want to see that other movie.
Yeah, the conversation between the two of them ended with this. Wyatt asked him, "What's the monster called?" Phil said, "Roman." Wyatt said, "What the hell's a Roman?" And Phil said, "That's short for Robot Man." "Okay, what's he gonna look like?" Phil said, "I don't know." But yeah, like, Phil's career is super interesting. He apparently made a movie called Space Jockey, which is worse than this one. But despite, having all that heat from Robot Monster, and he shot this in Alaska, I think a year or so after, the movie's lost. The movie has, there's publications referencing it, but there's no reviews for it. Like, no one knows what happened to it. People are hunting for it. But I don't know. I think you'll sooner see The Day the Clown Cried than Space Jockey.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, he's had a super interesting career. He made several movies with Lenny Bruce.
What?
Including one that Bruce wrote called Dance Hall Racket.
Okay, what was that about?
Dance Hall Racket. It's a crime movie.
Okay.
At this point, Lenny Bruce was not a successful comic. He was still struggling in nightclubs. And what they would do, their careers were the pits, but they bonded over that. And what Phil Tucker would do when things were not looking great is that he would take a couple of sleeping pills, a few too many, but not enough to be dangerous. And then Lenny Bruce would call the hospital, but he would also call all the reporters to say, oh, a film director has attempted suicide.
Oh.
And this would get some attention to Tucker, but also because Tucker was a veteran, he would be in a veterans hospital, and he claimed he would get fairly good meals and a decent place to sleep out of that.
Wow. Okay. Well, a lot of things are starting to come into focus now, especially when we talk about this movie's reputation as being something that was so bad that it drove its director to attempted suicide.
Yes, that, as it turns out, is not true. It's likely playing up on this little con game that the director had going with Lenny Bruce. We're talking about all the figures in Robot Monster, but none could be more important than Roman himself, and that is George Barrows, who plays both Roman and the Great Guidance. And he plays this part largely because he had his own gorilla suits.
You know what, though? Like, he's pretty good at being emphatic.
Well, his hand gestures are one of the funniest things in the movie.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Like, that weird two-finger gesture that almost looks like that lewd gesture from the UK that he frequently does as the Great Guidance to punctuate things is super, super funny. And simultaneously, I think that, okay, because here's the thing. George Barrows has been praised, believe it or not, as one of the great ape suit actors.
Fair enough.
Back in the 50s and 60s, that was a thing. And he showed up on a bunch of TV shows. He was on The Lucy Show. He was on The Addams Family as a gorilla in his gorilla suit, which, seeing the full suit, it's not bad. He apparently made it out of yak hair. Oh. But anyway, the diving helmet was not his idea. That's a different story. But he was given very little instruction on what to do, and I think was more or less dissuaded from doing any ape-like walking. So rather than doing anything characteristic or anything robotic, like anything with too much or too little personality, he just walks like an ordinary dude whenever he's walking around, which only
not
adds
like a robot or anything.
No, or a monster, which only adds to the comedy of Roman. Like, every time he's just strutting around, it's just a guy in a super hot ape costume wearing a diving helmet.
The writer Wyatt Ordong, he is very interesting for having been he's Chinese, and you don't get to hear about too many people who are not white making it into Hollywood in any way as anything but, token extras. But I really think he's the reason why this movie has more resonance beyond its components sometimes.
Yeah, he was something of a jack of all trades. Like, he was an actor, and one of the things that survives, and you can find it on YouTube, is that he is the title villain in a 2-part episode of the 1950s Dick Tracy show. Yeah. He plays someone named BB Eyes, which I'm going to assume is a race thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it's Dick Tracy. What do you expect? Anything different is monstrous. And, of course, he did work as an assistant director in addition to writing. And one of the movies that he worked on as an AD was called The Navy versus the Night Monsters, which stars Mamie Van Doren.
Whoa.
All the more reason to watch it. But later in his life, he became noted only for his eccentricities, and he claimed to be one of several masters of the esoteric arts.
Oh.
Apparently the Dalai Lama was one of them, and he claimed to have been eaten by birds in a previous life, so he had a terrifying fear of birds.
Fair enough. We should also mention George Nader. He's been in some other MST3K movies, The Million Eyes of Sumeru, The Human Duplicators. He might be interesting because he's another example of a queer actor who, kind of gets associated with science fiction. In fact, he wrote a 1978 debut novel called Chrome, which I kind of want to read. This is, quote, an explicitly homoerotic futuristic adventure novel.
And on top of that, I also want to read it because, according to the reviews, it's pretty bad.
Reaction was mixed.
So, then we have incorrectly credited as Selena Royale, which does lead to a nice riff on Casino Royale from Joel the Butts, who plays the mother, who has no name in this movie. And, she came from a background in the performing arts. Like, her father was playwright Edwin Royal, who helped Cecil B. DeMille get his start. and she was working in Broadway. She was one of the founders of a oh shoot, it's not here. Oh, the canteen thingy.
Oh, the Canteen Hollywood Canteen, where during the Depression, she and actress Elizabeth Beatty started the Actors Free Dinner Club, which was organized so that those who came to volunteer and those who came out of necessity were indistinguishable from each other.
Yeah, like this is someone who contributed to life, to society, to the arts, and she worked very steadily until we get to the anti-communist tract Red Channels, which alleged that she was a communist.
Yes, which apparently was completely baseless, and she sued them successfully for basically libel, but it did wreck her career nonetheless. This was the third last movie she ever did.
Yeah, and this was only a few years after she played the mother in a film called The Fighting Sullivans, where she got a lot of really good notices for her appearance there. But at this point, she's in Robot Monster. There's a typo in her name.
Yeah.
Her character doesn't have a name, and she looks visibly uncomfortable on screen. She does not seem to be happy with the film she ended up making.
They made her wear what is clearly a very uncomfortable dress. So the women, for whatever reason, the women are wearing futuristic, quote unquote, dresses. They're halter tops, which is a tough look for any woman to pull off, let alone a woman approaching middle age. So I was really like, you poor woman, why are they making you do this?
No, she should have held out for wearing the gorilla suit.
Yeah, so Selena Royal is yet another victim of the Joseph McCarthy scaremongering, which is ironic because, so much of this Red activity was the fear of communists taking over and the fear that everyone would be forced to act exactly the same and not express any individuality. And basically that is what Joseph McCarthy was doing too. If you had any kind of sense of individuality or if you were odd in any way, you were put on his hit list.
To live like the Huac, to laugh, to love.
In any case, I was reading that the composer for this movie, Elmer Bernstein, also got on the hit list of the Whack, but he was very early on in his career and it managed not to derail things.
Yes, so let's crawl into Bronson Canyon's most musical corner, the Scorner. Yeah, Elmer Bernstein rules. And this is one of the most high-profile composers ever featured on this show. I mean, it would really be neck and neck with him and John Barry, and to a lesser degree, James Horner. But yeah, he's a super, super famous composer. He's even an Oscar-winning composer, as he got it for Thoroughly Modern Millie in 1968.
That's the one. Oh my God. Okay, so I didn't know anything about this guy, but Adam, you were very nice to put together like a YouTube composite for me. And he's done so many important movies. He did The Magnificent Seven. He did The Great Escape theme.
And not only, well, he did the full score for The Great Escape. And, of course, he also did, with the same director, John Sturges, the Hallelujah Trail. Now, I think that Great Escape and Hallelujah Trail are probably the highlights of his career because they star, you guessed it, Donald Pleasance.
I noticed that in the credits sequence. I'm like, oh, have you seen that, by the way? It's a weird-sounding movie.
Oh, the Hallelujah Trail, yes. It's an all right comedy. The highlight is Pleasance as an oracle whose powers only work if he gets really, really drunk.
Like us all.
Yes, but Bernstein has his career is fantastic. Like, I guess the thing that he's best known for is that in the 1970s and 80s, he got a little bit typecast, so to speak, for doing comedy scores. He did the score for Ghostbusters. He did the score for Stripes, Airplane, Spies Like Us, and it got so bad in his career that he actually had to tell his agent, no more comedies. And this was around the time Ghostbusters 2 was being filmed. And he expressly did not want to do that movie because he thought that would be the death knell.
That's really sad because I have to say, my favorite piece of music that he did was what gets played when the Ghostbusters are waiting for the elevator in the fancy hotel.
Yeah, he's got incredible chops and great comic timing, and I think that's why he got so typecast. I think one of the reasons why Ghostbusters 2 doesn't work as a movie is that it's really missing his score. And worse, they hired the guy who wrote the MacGyver theme to do the score, which is one of the reasons why that movie also sucks. But be that as it may, we're in the early days of Bernstein. And, apparently, being a noted leftist got him in trouble. But it was also, as you said, it was early days. So, I mean, he had to break into Hollywood sometime. And really, when you get right down to it, like Robot Monster is 53. So he's doing his early work there, and he's doing a terrible movie. And he followed that up with an equally terrible movie, Cat Women of the Moon.
Oh.
But of which the scores, from what I've heard, are almost identical, at least for the kind of doom-laden main theme. Because really, there's two pieces of music for this 30-minute score. There's the kind of really, really brass-heavy main theme that you hear over the opening credits and that you hear whenever Roman is out for a stroll. And then there is a lot of plinking and plonking for Johnny and whenever he's playing, which sounds really out of place in the rest of the movie. But this score was written super quickly. He was not given a lot of money for it. And the historical records show that there was only one night to score the full thing with an 8-piece orchestra. So it's as good as it could possibly sound. I think he did, I think a composer like that is able to bring more to the table than someone more inexperienced would have, or someone less talented. But yeah, it was 3 years after Robot Monster that he was scoring the 10 Commandments for Cecil B. DeMille. So his career was fine. His association with leftist organizations or anything else didn't really hurt him in the long run. And he had a pretty fantastic career. It got to the point where if people brought up this movie, he just seemed to look at that as look, I had to make money somehow. He had a pretty good sense of humor about it. He was quoted as saying later, if you're going to do a really bad movie, at least you should do one that's at the top of the list.
Fair enough.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shadow 13.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shadow 13, where we ask the great guidance for 13 fun facts about both this movie and the episode of MST3K featuring it. Go Beth, go!
Turns out Robot Monster, though allegedly being one of the worst movies of all time, was a huge moneymaker. It cost about $16,000 to make, $4,500 of which went towards filming it in glorious 3D, but it grossed $1 million. $1 million. $1 million.
Roman's Cave featured a contraption that's forever blowing bubbles. This effect wasn't made by a few stagehands off screen. No, it was provided by the automatic billion bubble machine provided by N.A. Fisher Chemical Products. And, in the absence of action in this film, since Roman spends most of the movie doing a gentle stroll, the bubbles have to be Robot Monster's most spectacular 3D effects.
Speaking of bubbles, the Cumber Bubble Bund was later recycled as an invention by Dr. F and Frank in Season 4, Episode 4, Teenagers from Outer Space. To learn more about the Cumber Bubble Bund and Kevin Murphy's thoughts on its reuse, check out It's Just a Show, Episode 3.
Ever been curious about where the whoopee cushion came from? Not the flaming variety Drs. F and E come up with, but your good old-fashioned garden variety fart bag. The whoopee cushion, as we know it, came to existence in the fart capital of the world, Canada. Toronto's Gem Rubber Corporation invented the modern-day whoopee cushion in 1930.
Despite what you see in the opening credits, there was no Robot Monster comic. The cover comes from an issue of Strange Suspense Stories, which is visible at the bottom left corner of the screen. Other comics in the opening credits include Another World, Space Cadet, Worlds of Fear, John Carter of Mars, and This Magazine is Haunted.
Robot Monster borrows a lot of its special effects from other movies. Misties are sure to recognize the stop-motion dinosaur footage from Lost Continent and the rocket from Rocket Ship XM. You know your film's in bad shape when you're ripping off footage from Robert Lippert movies.
John Mylong's accent as the German professor has come under fire from most critics, but the actor worked extensively in Germany before migrating to Hollywood. Mylong, who acted under 9 other names, never made a lasting impression outside of Robot Monster, despite prominent roles in For Whom the Bell Tolls, His Kind of Woman, and Alfred Hitchcock's Mary.
The voice of both Roman and his boss were provided by comic actor John Brown. Though Brown's dulcet tones saw him thrive in radio, he became a TV fixture in the role of the ghoulish gravedigger Digger O'Dell on The Life of Riley. He can also be seen showing off his vocal talents as a professor whose true accent is only heard while drunk in Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train.
MTV aired a special edition of the film with newly shot wraparound sequences of Roman, played by movie memorabilia collector Bob Burns, and the synth group Space Cadet. While no one from the original film was involved, these color segments were shot in 3D and had the cast tossing whatever they could in front of the camera. A link to some footage for the special will be in our show notes.
Déjà vu, which Joel and the bots experience at the very end of the film due to a series of repeated shots, is a feeling of having already lived through something. If you do experience déjà vu, you are not, in fact, a precog. Most scientists think the experience is a result of a kind of brain fry where an old memory is re-experienced over a present event.
Meanwhile, in the shorts, who was that unmasked man in cahoots with the Moon Men? The episodes of Radar Men from the Moon screened in this episode feature Clayton Moore as a human crook working with Moon Men. Moore first gained fame as masked do-gooder Zorro in 1949's Ghost of Zorro, before his iconic turn as another masked do-gooder, the Lone Ranger.
Moore played the Ranger on the 1949 TV series for 4 of its 5 seasons, but the actor was said to be completely enamored with the character. Moore would do TV, commercial, and personal appearances in costume and in character for much of his life. Though he was sued by Ranger rights holder Jack Rather from appearing as the character in public, Moore successfully countersued and resumed his Lone Ranger appearances until the day he died. His star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame links them as one and the same: Clayton Moore, the Lone Ranger.
Déjà vu, which Joel and the bots experience at the very end of the film due to a series of repeated shots, is a feeling of having already lived through something. If you do experience déjà vu, you are not, in fact, a precog. Most scientists think the experience is a result of a kind of brain fry, where an old memory is re-experienced over a present event.
I get the feeling we've done that. Well, anyway, that's time. All right, Beth, let's talk about the legend that is Robot Monster. This was one of 13 films shown in season 1. But, I mean, okay, so The Crawling Eye made enough of an impression that there is a Misfits song about it. Okay. But really nothing else, even something with as kooky a title as Robot vs. the Aztec Mummy, very few of these movies really made an impression. But Robot Monster lived on and was already infamous by the time it was used as fodder for MST3K.
Yes, like as you were saying, they were reluctant to do this movie because of its prominence as something of a kind of Plan 9 from outer space level of notorious badness. So I guess the question is, how did it get that status, given the fact that it was a successful movie? It seems like this movie was really brought into the prominence, especially in the 80s and 90s, because of one quite influential book. And I think that's where probably Weinstein was getting his understanding of it. And that is a little book called 50 Worst Films of All Time by Harry Medved.
Boo!
Yeah. Well, this book has become quite a hated book for being basically teenage snark put to print. But it was quite influential at its time.
Yeah, and sure enough, like all the writers, or at least several of the writers of the with the inception of MST3K, have cited this as a big influence. So it certainly had value as a way to discover or rediscover these movies, and they championed, among other things, they championed Robot Monster as one of the worst of the worst.
Right, and they had, as part of the book, the Golden Turkey Awards, and yes. The Robot Monster won for Most Ridiculous Movie Monster, which, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, and yet it's like, it's funny, it's like, when you think about the ridiculous monsters on this show, you've got the walking carpet from The Creeping Terror, you've got Tor Johnson as Tor Johnson, you've got Richard Keel in a loincloth, and the invisible monsters from Cave Dwellers, and yet
you have the Attack of the Eye creatures.
Yeah, there's so many monsters, that are memorable, sure, but nothing quite as just spectacular as the visual of Roman. Like looking at the posters that originally promoted this movie, which have an extra bit of embellishment where instead of a guy's face underneath the diving helmet, it's actually the actor wearing a stocking, so his features are obscured.
Right.
They have a skull.
Yeah, which... What? What is going on?
And it's like, that's, on the one hand, I'm reminded of what a graphic designer friend of mine told me about Technodrome, in which he said, it's beautiful and it's stupid. And that is exactly how I think of his Roman. Like, it's such a wonderfully stupid mishmash to have a gorilla bottom half, or really neck down chunk, and a diving helmet with TV antenna. Like, it's brilliant. It's bizarre. I would never see this in my wildest dream.
It's brilliant. It's horrifying. Like, there's nothing holding it together as a theme. It's just a jumble, which is a monster, basically.
Yeah. The fact that Wyatt Ordung asked, what does the monster look like? And Phil Tucker said, I don't know. It shows. It really shows with the end result. They just cobbled what they had together. What's interesting is that robot suits would theoretically be either doable as a special effect, even if it was just like cardboard boxes painted silver and, old stuff from dryers being used and bits of equipment. Like, you could have kit bashed that together. You could have rented a robot suit, but no, it was, we know an actor. He's got a gorilla suit. He doesn't have to bring the head with him this time. We have a diving helmet.
We should also mention that people have been so inspired by this movie that there is now a musical of Robot Monster in existence. It debuted at the Hollywood Fringe Festival, and we'll have some links in our show notes.
Yeah, I gave a listen to one of the songs, and it's pretty good. I would be more than happy to watch this show. Of all the B movies to get a musical tribute, I can think of none more fitting than Robot Monster. I mean, Roman's a tragic character.
He really is.
Yeah, he's conflicted. I mean, he must, but he cannot. God bless this movie.
So we've talked an awful lot about this movie, because obviously it's the most interesting part of this episode, but the segments were actually pretty cute. And I especially liked the segment where all the robots' heads blow off, trying to figure out how a bee could exist. But this is an interesting urban legend that apparently bees, according to physics, should not be able to fly.
Now, I assume that this has something to do with sheer bee determination.
Nothing gets away from physics, nothing gets to break the rules of physics. Otherwise, we would just have tiny bee-shaped black holes all over the place. So basically, this is from a legend that a biologist and I think a mathematician were talking at a bar, and the biologist was like, prove to me that bees can actually fly, and he wasn't able to do it mathematically. Long and short of it, bees aren't planes. So you can't address the physics that we give to planes to the way that bees' wings work.
And though I do get the two confused, you're right, bees aren't planes. And from what I understand,
Are we sure?
What?
Well, maybe they are. I don't know.
Is a bee a plane? We hope to get Neil deGrasse Tyson in here to figure that out. He'll well actually us to inform us that bees aren't planes. But doesn't that have everything to do with what you're saying? Yeah, you're right. Like, everything has to do with their wings. Like, they don't fly up and down. They don't move up and down. They rotate.
Yeah, apparently, because first of all, they're not rigid, so you have a completely different physical issues going on with the way that they create lift. But from what I understand is they create tiny little hurricanes underneath their wings through negative pressure, which is really cool.
So wait, why is it called the butterfly effect and not the bee effect?
I don't know, man. I guess because butterflies are so gentle and sweet that even they're trying to talk about something so quietly swaying and have that much of an impact. Whereas bees, they always look like they're working hard,
Oh, I think they look adorable. They're like little marshmallows.
I know, they're so cute. So, anyway, bees are great, and they don't destroy the laws of physics to fly. The end.
All right, well, we've committed to every part of the plan, but I understand, Chris, you have a very special final fact for us as we wrap up this episode.
I do. So you guys mentioned in the Shallow 13 the automatic billion bubble machine. There's one scene where the bubbles are flying everywhere and Crow nails an absolutely perfect imitation of Lawrence Welk saying,
We'll be right back after this message from Geritol.
Now, I should say, if you haven't seen it, the Lawrence Welk show featured bubbles everywhere. It was very bubblicious. And apparently, according to the actor who played young Johnny, Gregory Moffat, the automatic billion bubble machine in the movie is the same one used by Lawrence Welk. I am not convinced that that is true because the Lawrence Welk one was made in 1938, which is well before the movie was made. And I thought it was made especially for Lawrence Welk. Nevertheless, they're very similar. There's lots of good bubbles. And the Lawrence Welk show. Have either of you guys watched the Lawrence Welk show much?
Have not.
My grandmother loved it, and I despised it.
Oh, your grandmother was right.
No, she wasn't. I ran away, and I was correct.
Well, maybe she wasn't right about everything, but she was right that there is a special joy to be gained from the Lawrence Welk show, which is a kind of collection of misfits and oddballs who are performing really weird songs. While, admittedly, like the downside of it is that they are all pretending to be wholesome and pure, which maybe they were. I'm not trying to say anything about their character. I don't have any inside scoop, but it's so over the top and they're such a treat and they're so ridiculous. And once you sort of get the angle on each of the different performers' weird eccentricities, from the ridiculous Irish baritone and his ridiculous Irish accent to the tap dancing, which is just insane, to the sort of the over-the-top pure singing of the Wayne and Wanda type characters who are coming on. Like, it's really a treat once you get into the groove. Admittedly, if you're not into the groove yet, if you don't have somebody to initiate you into the pleasures of Lawrence Welk, it'll be off-putting, but it can be really nice once you're into it. If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you sting like a butterfly but fly like a bee, or if you'd like to ask Beth and Adam anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, or we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. It's Just a Show is a podcast from Megaphonic FM, and you can find all of the fancy little shows at megaphonic.fm. And thanks yet again to all of our Patreon supporters. You can support It's Just a Show and access some superfan bonus bits by going to itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow, and we'd be eternally grateful. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today on It's Just a Show, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/37.
Oh, and before we go, one last note. I do want to give a shout out to a book that I read that helped in the research for this episode, which is I Cannot Yet I Must by Anders Runstad. Definitely be a link in our show notes that tells the story of Robot Monster and features the complete script.
Perfect.
So if you want to read along with the movie, there you go. Friends, Roman, countrymen. I think we're done.
Yes, indeed. What do we have next?
Well, I'm sure both of you, like me, like the Roman, have always wanted to be like the Hugh-Man, to laugh like the Hugh-Man, to melt like the Hugh... Wait, what? Well, let's find out in Season 7, Episode 4, The Incredible Melting Man.
Ooh, gross.
Yeah. All right, everybody, prepare to get gooey.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really gross one.
Yeah, the guy is basically soup on two legs.
But it's a Season 7, which is not so secretly my favorite season.
Plus, it'll be fun to go back into it after the Deathstalker movie. Yeah, this will be a lot of fun. And just in time for the spooky time of Halloween.
Well, until then,
I cannot, yet I must, say goodbye.
Don't wear high heels to an apocalypse.
indeed, take it away, Theme Squad.
Déjà vu, which Joel and the bots experience at the very end of the film due to a series of repeated shots, is a feeling. What?